Welcome, welcome all. Thank you all for joining us on this Thursday night. This is the Georgia Prison Watch podcast, and this is one of your hosts, Susan Sparks Burns from They Have No Voice, and I am joined by Brian Randolph, the executive director of the Human and Civil Rights Coalition of Georgia. Brian, are you with me?
Hey, I'm here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We have one primary topic for tonight, and that's extortion. But before we go into that, we want to talk briefly on one subject that we failed to get to last week because we talked too much. But that is the American Correctional Association, what it is, and the people who run for office in the American Correctional Association. Gosh, if y'all are seeing what I'm seeing, it says strong leadership, integrity, accountability. Gosh, those are good qualities. The American Correctional Association is an association of as many correctional organizations as would like to join. Mainly, they are the state prisons, the Departments of Corrections, DOCs. And they are the association itself is one that they pay to join, and then as they meet the requirements for each facility, they pay additional money to join. And they call it to be accredited. And you can see, as you have 34 state prisons in Georgia, each one of those Georgia Department of Corrections would like to be accredited. And so they pay each time one is accredited, and GDC will always pat themselves on the back that yet another facility has been accredited for the ACA. Well, if you are on the other side of the fences, you hear all the time about audits, but the ACA does not perform actual audits. They do a walkthrough, but there are no standards for what they're seeing, and nothing gets written up and reported to the prison or the prison leadership as to what they saw, and nothing's graded. So those are characteristics of audits, real audits. Those are what happens with this is walkthrough, and they make sure that each facility has in place the SOPs for GDC as well as any local SOPs. I guess they call those LOPs, local operating practices. So, that's sort of how it works, but you can see how this is something that has dues, and it has a fee to join. It has dues. And when the ACA comes out to do their audits that y'all hear about, I'm sure that GDC has to pay for that. So it's kind of a money-making venture. And they do have a national convention each year, and all the mucky mucks in the higher ups in the state departments of correction, they all go, and of course the officers of the American Correctional Association are there, and everyone pats each other on the back. So our big news is that Georgia's commissioner of the last, 14 months has been nominated for vice president of the American Correctional Association. So We're taking votes tonight to find out if you think he'll become the vice president. I'm just kidding about that. But, Brian, what would you like to add to this?
Well, you know, it's interesting, and you know, I think that you know, um, when you have someone whose prison is in a crisis, as Georgia prisons are, um, and you have a man like Tyrone Oliver, who has for the last 14 months taken no accountability whatsoever. You know, I had high hopes when Oliver was appointed to the um, DOC, that he would actually try to come in and turn it around. Um, and he's done the complete opposite. So you know, it always strikes me as odd and funny when you see the integrity and the accountability. Um, you know, he has held no one accountable in the Department of Corrections since he's took office. No one available, accountable. Excuse me. And now he wants to be the vice president of this American Correctional Association, which stands in short for ACA, which is just is a complete joke. You alluded to it's just a money grab. That's all the American Correctional Association is a money grab. They have no oversight whatsoever over the GDC. And Susan, you know, there's always a saying that's been going around probably since I was born, and I'm sure you know, it's a sweep around your own front door before you try to sweep around mine. And you know, Tyrone Oliver should have his main focus in Georgia instead of trying to be a vice president of a correctionals association. So, you know, it's a complete joke. Um, you know, and like I said, I haven't voted yet. Um, so you know, I, it's to be determined.
Brian, I have no idea how much time is involved in being the vice president, but I don't know how he has a minute to give to anything other than the Georgia Department of Corrections. Georgia Department of Corrections is being investigated in the largest DOJ investigation in history. I mean, the investigation in Alabama at the time was the largest, and that was 13 prisons. Now, this one is 34 prisons. And the reason the primary reason that we haven't seen an initial report yet has to do with how broad this investigation is, how many facilities are involved, and then how much activity there is as far as CRIPA violations. Those are the Eighth Amendment violations that have to do primarily with violence, deaths, including murders and suicides, as well as the conditions. And even as you go farther and farther out from the primary areas, the medical care, the food quality, these are all things that make up the conditions of incarceration. And we have things that you'd better believe were covered up when the DOJ was at the facilities. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm thinking of some of the mental health areas, some of the holes. Some of those probably didn't get even as much as a walkthrough. And that's just how it goes. You know, if you can keep your investigators away from your worst areas, that's what you want to do if you are trying to brush something under the rug. And
Right.
that's what GDC is all about.
Oh yeah, they're the shady bunch. You'll hear it here. You'll hear it many times here on this podcast. That unfortunately we're dealing with a shady bunch, and they are called the Department of Corruption because they are a corrupt bunch that they're dealing with from the top all the way down. I don't know how you would want to be, closing out this topic about Oliver. I don't know how you could be want to be an association vice president and you don't even answer emails or telephone calls um, or messages or anything from anyone, but you want to be a vice president over a correctional association. So, you know, as I said, I think I'll hold on to my vote, Susan.
Well, I I would I would very much rather see him. I mean, there he's bound to go to the 2 or 3 day probably convention that they have where they pat each other on the back and of course announce the winners of the elections. But I'd rather he be there learning from others, spending his time instead of glad handing, spending his time saying to Massachusetts, so y'all provided free cell phones to all your inmates. How'd that go? And, finding out from New York, oh, you have free cell phones for all your inmates. How's that go? Instead of every time he opens his mouth in the state of Georgia, talk about the evil of cell phones. If it were not for cell phones, we would not have thousands of videos, and we sure wouldn't have the information that we have that flows out of those prisons. They're doing their damnedest to cap that information flow off from cell phones. That's what the cell phones are all about.
That's right. Yeah, it's all about getting those phones and nothing else. That's unfortunate. We also seen, and we talked about last week on the podcast, and I promise you, we won't be here for an hour tonight or over an hour. And apologize for coming on late. We had some technical difficulties, so we just was able to get on. But going back to the cell phones, there was another statement that he released last month about officers being it's more civilians than twice as many civilians as officers who's bringing in contraband or attempting to introduce contraband into their safe and secure facilities. And they continue with this safe and secure facilities nonsense about every post that we see on their social media and now is safe and something about safe and secure facilities, and we know that that's just not true. But when you talk about that, we have saw over the last week at least 6 or 7 correctional officers that has been completely fired and charged with all types of various charges about Valdosta State Prison, Smith State Prison, Rutledge State Prison. They're locking them up left and right. And just last month, Oliver stated that there was no way that officers was bringing in as much as contraband as civilians was trying to introduce into these places. So, you know, uh, I'll say, God don't like ugly, Susan.
No.
He said that last month, and he's already had at least 12 in February, at least 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and
And
if they keep this up, they're not going to have anybody to work in these places.
no, they one of those officers that we read about had like 12 packages in his locker, and in those 12 packages, it included 740 grams of meth. And it actually said going to an inmate, that's going to one person, that's 1.5 pounds of meth. That's a lot to go to a single person, and they better come across with a whole lot of money for that.
Yeah.
So and I saw that a couple of the civilians who were charged, two of the guys in separate incidents, separate facilities, had glue for closing up, glue for gluing up wounds, stab wounds. I thought, man, this is pretty sad that they have to handle their own first aid by having a drone bring in glue. But okay.
Yeah, so that's get that. That covers that for
Yeah.
this show. We could do a show. We could do a podcast every week for the foolishness that we see, and just the corrupt staff that we see, being arrested and being fired every week. But let's jump into our main topic tonight, because I think this is important. We've been speaking offline, for a while now, and I think this was maybe one of the major things that we needed to talk about. And we actually did a show, what I guess about 3 years ago, dealing with extortion.
Yes.
And I think it's one that needs to be touched on again. Because it's just, it's happening every day. So this is going to be a little twist. I guess we can call it extortion with a twist, because we hear of extortion every day pretty much, and it's just not. There's not much been done about it, and so we have to we got to talk about it, Susan. So. I don't know if you want to open this one up or how you want to go about it, but let's get in. Let's take a dive into extortion and what we're seeing and what we're hearing and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to start with an approach that I took to it. I had contacted my local police, sheriff's department several years ago about the subject, and did they want us to call, since they were the local law enforcement agency for the recipient of the call. And they told me no. So just this past year, back in July of last year, I contacted the new head of investigations for the GBI, and took her about a week to get back in touch with me. But my question was, do y'all want us to call you to notify you when we're being extorted, that we've received an extortion account and an extortion demand, I guess, and that our loved one may be in danger or in any of that? And she said, oh no, refer that to your local law enforcement and also to the facility where where it was received, where it was coming from. So I contacted GDC and I asked, do y'all want to know when we have people out here that are having extortion demands, and it happens every day. And they said, "Oh, sure, you can tell us." Well, I looked online, and they had if you clicked on some of their, like they had like a hotline if someone in prison is trying to commit a crime against you, or if an officer does anything. There were 4 choices when you clicked on it, and one of them was for extortion. But what it didn't do was contact you back, like to get an official report, or to contact your local law enforcement, or to contact the GBI. And with that, we're out of law enforcement agencies. Of course, GDC being the largest law enforcement agency in the state, where you run out of law enforcement agencies pretty fast, which says to me that extortion is a hot potato in Georgia. No one in law enforcement wants to hear about it. And yet, this crime is probably one of the largest in the state of Georgia. It's going on every single day. And the quantities of money may start out at $50 or $100 or $250. They may start out like that, but they may ultimately be, over a course of time, thousands and thousands of dollars. So if your loved one is new to this, new to the prison experience, and it's already started, you have to make a decision early on. Are you just going to go ahead and open up your bank account to them, or are you going to stop it? So, Brian, what do you think?
Well, 2 things, and that was I guess a good way to open it. But 2 things. We've said, I don't know how many times, not 100 times, maybe 25, maybe 50 times, that we don't pay extortionists. That is um, my number one piece of advice when people reach out, sometimes on a weekly basis, that they're being extorted. We do not pay extortionists. Um, we do not give anyone money to continue, their crime. We're not going to enable them. And a lot of things that we see and that we hear, well, they're going to kill little Johnny, or they're going to do this, or they're going to do that. Well, chances are they're not going to kill little Johnny. They believe that they have a person that if they scare enough, that person will then, in return, pay them their ransom demand. And I guess there's ways, and there's a couple type of extortions that people have to look out for, if you're being extorted, or if you have been in the past. One of the ways that these gangs will extort you or extort your loved one is protection to for being in the dorm. So whatever dorm they're in, the gang will normally approach, um, normally people that's not affiliated with any gang, um, and say that they can protect them from other gangs in the dorm. Uh, and that's normally a weekly price. I don't know. From what I've heard, is can be from $60 a week to $150 a week to $250 a week. I don't know if that just where you're at or what facility you're in, but that's one way of the extortion. And then the second one that we've heard of is paying for assigned bunk or a sale. So that what that means is you have to pay the rival gang in order to be able to sleep in the assigned bunk that the GDC has given you, or the assigned cell that the GDC has given you, or I'm sorry, that the GDC has assigned to that particular person or your loved one. So those are two of the extortion routes that gangs use. Now, I will say this: probably the first one is more common, and is seen probably on a daily basis. Is the gangs will go and they'll approach someone, probably someone that's younger, that just got into the system, that's not affiliated with any gang, and they'll demand that in order for you to be protected from the other gangs, you have to pay that particular gang, so much money a week, and pretty much what it's doing is you're paying them to stay where you've been assigned, and they're not, and those gangs are not going to protect you whatsoever. They're extorting you or extorting your loved one for money. They're not going to protect whatsoever. So those are two of the major extortions that we hear about and that we know are going on a daily basis. We also know that they are heavily extorting when you get off of the bus at Georgia Diagnostics and Classification Prison. We know that, I mean, just as soon as you get off the bus, they're stealing Bibles and legal paperwork and personal property with phone numbers and addresses, and they're using cell phones, and they're demanding hundreds and hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars, or they're going to do some type of harm or danger um, to whoever they're trying to extort. Just late last year at GDCP, there was a lady. I mean, her son hadn't been off the bus. I don't know, Susan, 2 hours, 3 hours, and they attempted to extort her for I think $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a common thing that we're seeing, and going back to what Susan said a few minutes ago, you can report it, but what are they going to do about it? And I'd say probably absolutely nothing. So there's a couple things that if you're being extorted, if you can get it to me, or you can get it to Susan, we can we can get it in the right hands, and we can try to have something done about it um, pretty quickly. I think we both have connections where if you're being extorted, if your loved one's been extorted, that we've built a relationship with some pretty high people that we can possibly get the situation rectified, and to get to make it stop. But as I said, number one, do not pay them. I don't care how many times they call you. I don't care how many times they say this or they say that. We don't pay these guys to continue their crime behind these walls and these fences. So, tell them to knock it off. Tell them you're going to report them, and then do whatever is in your power to get the information to us, and we will 100% try to have it stopped immediately. And
Brian,
go ahead.
may I ask what happens if they do pay it?
Well, if they do pay it, there's going to continue to ask more for more.
So when they
It's
call
just
tomorrow, what'll it be?
yeah. Tomorrow it'll be, if you paid $100 today, it'll probably be $200 tomorrow. You open up a revolving door when you decide that you want to pay these guys for uh, for 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 extortion. You open up a 100% revolving door. And I'll let you add something, Susan. And I want to give everybody a kind of some things too that can kind of help us stop it. But Susan, I'll stop and let you break in here real quick.
I absolutely agree with Brian on this. If you'll get in touch with either of us, we will try to get in touch with someone who can extract the loved one, perhaps get them in a different dorm. That's that's uh, quite possible. Someone who, if the loved one has been injured, can get them where they will not be injured any longer. But for heaven's sake, stop paying it. That's and if you don't, if the requests or demands really continue, that's a whole different game, really. I think right now we're talking about when your loved one first goes to prison and they're new to this, and you're new to this, they're new to this, everyone's upset, everyone's afraid. And one of the things I hear quite commonly, and Brian alluded to it, they may have written their loved one's phone numbers down in their Bibles. Tell them before they go to prison, don't write it in the front or the back of the Bible. Pick a favorite Bible verse and write it on the inside margin in pencil, so that when they're going through the Bible looking for your personal phone numbers, they will overlook it. If they find a list of numbers, they're calling everybody on the list. And if some of those people say, no, I don't have any money, no, I don't know him, somebody's going to say yes. And once it starts, you can't stop it.
Yeah, it's a revolving door. It's 100% a revolving door. And you know, I just I think that it's very, very important. People have to realize that you know they're not going to protect your loved one. They're not going to do it, and that's not what it's for. It's to um, further the illegal activity of the gang, and it's people that are out here that that's in there that has nobody, um, and they will go to any means necessary to get your money to um, try to enrich themselves. Another thing, and I wanted to kind of jump into this. The ways that you can help us if you need help, if you're being extorted, is save all of the phone numbers that they call you from.
Yes.
The Cash App. If you're being extorted now, um, or in the past, screenshot the transactions on Cash App or whatever payment app that you use to send them the money. You always want to screenshot the transaction, screenshot the name that the Cash App is under. But keep a dialogue of who you're talking to. Get as much as information that you can from that person. Sometimes you got to use reverse psychology on them, and you got to you got to make them think that you're trying to help them. and you got to get as much as information as you can from them, because these people that unfortunately do this, Susan, um, they're not rehabilitated, and they probably will never be rehabilitated. If you're behind the walls and you're still committing crimes, then you're not rehabilitated, and you probably will never be. But a lot of screenshots, phone numbers that they're calling you from, that they have called you from, as much information that you can get as possible will help us kind of probably determine and turn all of that over, and hopefully they'll do a thorough investigation and they'll get the people behind it. But that information is really, really helpful for us to have so that we can turn it over. And, if you, and, I don't know, I don't have really any much thing to add with that, Susan. Do you know of anything else that we would possibly need?
No, that's the most helpful information, and it adds gravitas to us, to our explanation when we go to our contacts and say, this person in this dorm in this facility is being extorted, and here's the call, the numbers that it's coming from. They may not even get them that day, that night, the next day. At some point, they're going to shake down that dorm and get those numbers.
Yeah.
Somebody is they are, no one's going to get charged for that if they don't have the information.
Right.
So help us help them. GDC is very proud of how many cell phones they get. It's huge, thousands of cell phones that in the shakedowns. There's only so many places in a concrete block room that someone can hide things, and they may be hiding the SIM card one place and the phone another place and so forth, and having it wrapped up, taking every step they can to keep their phones. But at some point, that phone and that number may very well fall into the hands of GDC, who can get them charged.
Yeah.
And so the whole story.
Right. And so, and moving on, because, like I said, we don't want to be here as we were last week, over an hour. So, this needs to be said as well. As we talk about extortion now, we know 100% that they go after the weak. They go after non-affiliated individuals, younger individuals, and so we know 100% that does. I can't even talk. I'm sorry. Does do. We 100% know that does happen. What we also know that happens is, and a lot of people will reach out and say, "Oh, I'm being extorted. I'm being this. I'm being that." And we come to find out after we do a little investigating that their loved one is owing, has, excuse me, owes a debt, either for drugs or cigarettes or whatever, they have decided that they wanted to get in debt for. And the person that is calling you just wants the money that your loved one has decided that they wanted to spend, and that person is calling you because they want their money. So we understand that extortion 100% does happen, but also when people say that they're being extorted, well, not so much. Your loved one is in there running up a big bill for drugs. And then that person, the drug dealer, is calling you because you got to think, well, how did that person get my number? If your loved one has been at a facility for 6, 7, 8 months and you never had a phone call and then out of the blue you get a phone call, and they're asking you for the money that your loved one has has ran up, then you're not being that's not being extorted. Your loved one has unfortunately put you in that position to probably believe that that they're being extorted so you can pay the money. But that is not the case. And we'll give a prime example just a second, but I'm gonna let Susan chime in on that, because Susan, we see it all the time where some of these extortion cases are not extortion cases whatsoever. It's from a debt that their loved one has ran up.
I was contacted by a mother who was very upset about the continuing extortion calls, and I happened to know somebody in that dorm. And so the next time I had an opportunity to ask him, I said, "Do you know this guy?" And he says, "Oh, yeah, everybody knows him." And I said, "Well, why would he be getting extorted?" He said that he's such a bad strip user that he even sells his hygiene, and no one will even let him sleep in the room with him. So he's on the floor out in the day room, and he does strips as much as he can get, and his mama is paying for it. And that's the crux of the story an awful lot of the time.
Right. Well, and last year we ran into a case where a gentleman was actually behind extorting his own grandmother for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Was actually sending her messages, not the extortionist or not the supposed extortionist, was sending his grandmother messages. He was behind trying to extort his own grandmother out of hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and actually sent his grandmother messages and said that he had been tied up, sent her messages that he had been beat up, that he was, locked in a mop closet, and they just let him out so he could so he could make a phone call, so he could get the money to pay, and to come to find out, and luckily enough, the grandmother had some sense of, and started investigating a little bit more, and actually said that she wasn't sending any money, and then had enough, even more sense to think that, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. And come to find out, it was she had confronted him about, the messages and, everything. And he admitted that it was him the entire time. It was no extortionist. It wasn't anyone else. It was him trying to extort his own grandmother out of money, probably to pay, you know, for his drug debt. And so we see this stuff every day, and Susan can contest to that story because you I read the messages, and we spoke about it at great length. So
His grandmother was my age and working 2 full-time jobs to pay his to pay his drug money.
right,
She was keeping him high in prison, and she was in her 70s working 2 full-time jobs.
yeah, yeah.
It broke my heart.
Yeah. So the moral of the story is, as we talk about extortion, is that you have to be smart, and you have to realize when you're being extorted and when you're not being extorted. And this is a tough conversation to have, but we got to have the conversation so you can know, and look for the signs that you are, if the extortion attempt is actually real or not. And so what I'm going to say now is, it may be come off as hard, but it's really just the truth. And unfortunately, the Department of Corrections has not done anything to treat drug addiction in their facilities, and you have people that go into prison with drug addictions, and they're going to get out of prison probably even more addicted to drugs than they were when they went in. Because the Department of Corrections has no plan, no rehab, no rehabilitation, nothing to actually help these people overcome their drug problem. So you got to ask the tough questions sometimes. If you know your loved one has went into prison, addictive to drugs, and they're asking you, every 3 or 4 days for so much money, then you got to start wondering. You need to start asking questions. Another thing is, Susan, as well. Store call is once a week.
Yep.
The minimum, I'm sorry, the maximum that you can spend is $60. If you're spending, if you're paying over $60 a week, or you sending over $60 a week to your loved one, then you probably need to start asking questions on why am I sending, over $60 a week when you can only go to the store one time a week. And so those are some of the questions that you have to start asking, start asking yourself, speaking to your loved ones about, and you just have to, because if you knew that your loved one went into prison with a drug habit or a drug addiction, um, it's not going to get any better in the Department of Corrections. I mean, it's just not. And sometimes they put themselves in the position where they're having to call you to get that money that they owe the drug dealer, and then somehow they don't get the money, and they give your phone number to the drug dealer, and then the drug dealer calls you, wanting the payment. And they, as I said a few seconds ago or a few minutes ago, they just didn't get your phone number out of the blue. They didn't go to the counseling office and say, hey, let me get little Johnny's mama's or grandmother's phone number, and I'm going to call them and collect the drug debt that little Johnny's ran up. They're getting that information from little Johnny, and they're putting you in a position where you're worried, where you're afraid for their safety, and that's a position that unfortunately, your loved one puts you in, and then you're just left to wonder, what can I do? And then so go ahead, Susan.
Brian and I also had a shared experience about 3 years ago with a young woman whose husband was husband to be was incarcerated here in Georgia, and he actually sent her pictures to convince her that he was being beaten up. And the two of the pictures, I have all the pictures still, of course, but two of the pictures were this. One was the tiniest little black eye, the kind like you could get if you were doing something at home and popped yourself in the face with something, I don't know, but not like a grown man hit you in the face with his fist, not that. And then the other picture was a round burn on his back. And he had told her that he had been tied in a chair and he had been burned as torture because he hadn't paid his drug debt. He was saying he was on drugs, but he was part of it. He was in on it, and he actually told them, burn me. And if you ask yourself, if I'm going to get burned Where do I want to be burned? I'd only burn in my face and not my hands. That hurt. So least the least painful place I imagine to get burned is probably maybe on your back, and that was what he had. So she paid him. She paid it all. 3 months later, he comes back with the same story. He'd been tied in a chair. He'd been beaten up. And again, it was one little almost black eye, but it wasn't swollen or anything, please. And the same thing, they were threatening to burn him again. Know your audience. It's a hard thing to face that someone you love is tricking you into paying money, lots of money, and that they are willing to get hit in the face and willing to get burned to get the money. So just please do your best to say no. I hate to say this, but they may really owe the debt. Now that may be absolutely true, but it's not your debt. And if they can't work out a way to work it off, pay it off, whatever it might be, they may actually end up being beaten up. But it's the reality of incarceration, unfortunately. And out here, once they start, they will continue until you have no money left, until it's all gone. I'm sorry, but that is the truth.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, we're not saying 100% at all that real extortion attempts do not happen, because we know for a fact that they happen every single day. But we're also giving everyone the information that you know everything that you think that's an extortion attempt is not attempt. It's at the own doing sometimes, not all the time, of your loved one. And as Susan just said, and I said earlier, we're not going to pay it. At some point, you know, if they have put themselves in that position, you have to learn. You got to let them. You got to let them get it out, get themselves out of it. And as Susan said, they may get beat up. That may happen. But it's at a they put themselves in that position. And if you pay it one time, then you're going to pay it the second time. If you pay it the second time, you're going to pay it the third time. I spoke with a mother last week who was paying $200 a week. $200 a week. Supposedly, she said that her son told her it was for cigarettes. $200 a week. And she reached out and said, "I can't pay it anymore. I just lost my job, and I can't pay the money." And he's calling me now, wanting, he's needing the money because they're after him, and they're going to they're going to kill him at 7 p.m. Is what he
Mm-hmm.
relayed to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, you're not going to pay it. And furthermore, you're going to have a conversation with him, that's his bill, that's his debt. He decided that he wanted to get the supposed cigarettes, and he's going to have to deal with, um, whatever consequences that they do. And one thing that I did tell her as well, I said, well, if they were going to kill him, they would have killed him right then. They wouldn't wait till 7 o'clock, 5, 6 hours later. They're not going to tell you they're going to kill you, and they're not going to wait and kill you 5 hours later. That's the stuff that you have to think about in those situations. But as I said, you got to think about it. If they're calling you, if you haven't been extorted before, and then your loved one starts calling you and asking you for $200-300 a week, and it's getting up there into them amounts, then you got to start thinking. And then when someone does call you, you got to start thinking, well, okay, now I have been paying $100 a week, and now they're calling me and they're wanting this and they're wanting that. Well, you gotta think in between the lines of what exactly has happened and exactly what's going on for someone to be calling you. And unfortunately, the reason why we're talking about this is unfortunately we've been seeing it quite often lately. Um, and it's becoming to be a problem. And I want to reiterate 100% that we're not saying at all that real extortion attempts does not happen, because 100% they do. And we've given you the nuggets if you need help with having it stopped. We've given you the information. We'll go right back over it just a second before we close out. But Susan, anything else you want to add about this extortion? Because I think it's a very big and important topic to talk about, and I'm glad we had this discussion. Sometimes it's hard discussions. It's tough topics that we just have to cover. But I mean, it's the truth, and I hope that it will help someone moving forward.
If it's possible to have a conversation, a hard conversation before they go, that's great, before they go to prison. But there are some things you simply will have a hard time telling them if they are mentally handicapped, for example, or and trust everyone. Wow, it's going to be a hard time being in prison like that. But it's hard to say to your loved one, man up, be tough, tell them, get away from me, whatever it might be. But at the very least, have them not have a little notebook with all your phone numbers in it. Have the numbers spread out so that it's more difficult to get them, and then have him know or her know from the get-go, you're not going to pay it. You're not part of their drug addiction or whatever it is, cigarette addiction. It's not your debt. That's on them while they're in prison.
That's right. And it's as we said, this is for people that's been in there for 5 years, 6 years. You got to have those tough conversations with your loved ones, because their addiction problem is not it's not something that's just going to go away. And it's just going to cause more problems and more problems. And the information, they're going to run up a tab. Their information is going to get in. Your information is going to get into the wrong hands because they believe that you'll pay it, and then you're going to feel like you're being extorted. When in realization, it's just that person calling to get that debt paid. So as I said, if you're being extorted, as we close out, as many screenshots as you can of the transactions, of the phone numbers that call you, of the messages that are sent, any information that's possible to get. and you can get it to myself or you can get it to Susan, and we'll help you 100% with the extortion attempts and this, and even if you have paid and you continue to pay, reach out to us, and we'll use our resources that we have, and try to get this stopped. And as Susan said, you know, if it's getting someone moved, or get them to medical attention, or whatever the case may be, we'll try our darndest to get some relief immediately, for the situation, because you shouldn't be in that position. Um, the facilities are dangerous enough that you have to worry about anything that goes on, and then it's especially, sending your hard-earned money to individuals who, just have no regard for anything or anyone, and will try anything that they can to get your money. So, as I said, as much evidence as you can as possible, we'll get it into the right hands, and we'll try to get it stopped as quick as we can and as best as we can. Um, but it just, if you don't say anything and you continue to pay it, then hey, do what you do. But I'm telling you, um, this is a major problem. It's a major issue, and it just has to stop. And we're here to help any way we can to get it stopped. Susan, I'll let you close us out.
Well, um, folks, we don't mean to be preaching at you, and we aren't talking about your loved one. We're really trying to help you understand what actually goes on, and that there is a solution. And it may not be easy, but it's definitely easier than paying until you have nothing left. And that's how long they'll go on. Stopping it is on you. So we'll probably do another extortion podcast within a year because it's something that just has to be said periodically.
That's right. That's right. So, anything else, Susan, before we get out of here? Anything else you want to add?
That's all.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening to the Georgia Prison Watch podcast tonight. We definitely appreciate everyone that has watched live and listened live, and will listen in the days to come. Leave us some messages in the comments on what you thought, and any advice that you may have to other ones that's going through that, or reach out if you're going through, or have went through it. Reach out to us and let us know what you did to get it to stop, or maybe you haven't got it to stop. Reach out to us, and send us a message, or send us something in comments, and just let us know, and we'll have that dialogue. So, once again, thanks for everybody for coming on with us tonight, and have a good weekend, and we will see everyone back next Tuesday or Thursday night. I don't know which one yet, Susan, but we'll be back sometime next week.
That sounds good. Thanks,
All right,
everybody.
Bye-bye.